Hello and welcome to the Countersport Six Nations Pod. I'm your host, Darren Timson, joined by Kevin Bannon and Liam Grice. And today, guys, we're going to kick things off the big news yesterday. Warren Gatland has left Wales after the defeat to Italy. Grice, your dreams have come true. Your wishes have been granted. What's your thoughts on the situation?
I mean, I don't think we have long enough on the podcast to talk about it all in too much detail, but if I'm going to talk about it briefly, I was talking to you about it, wasn't I, during the week, and I think you actually made a very good point of we don't really lose anything by changing it mid-tournament. I was initially quite surprised that they were going to change it mid-tournament. I thought they'd ride it out and do it at the end to spare his blushes, but to be fair to them, they've been a bit cutthroat and got someone else in. I don't really know too much about the new coach, Matt Sherratt, but can't be any worse than what's going on right now. So why not give him a go till the end of the tournament? It seems like the old football adage of chuck him in for a couple of games and see how he does, sort of thing. But I mean, it's a mess from top to bottom in Welsh rugby, and that's not really going to be solved by the changing of a head coach. But if it spares the WRU's blushes for a little while, then that's what has to be, I guess.
Yeah, he's Matt Sherratt, like you mentioned. He's currently the coach of Cardiff Rugby. They sit fifth in the United Rugby Championship. So clearly he's a good coach there because Welsh club rugby hasn't been the greatest of the past few years, but Cardiff has definitely been the standout team. He's going to take over until the end of the tournament, and then the names of Telegraph, the Independent, sorry, that I've put out as potential replacements is, I guess, him to see how he does, and if he does a really good job, and they might appoint him. Then you've got Simon Easterby, who's currently subbing for Andy Farrell at the minute, Franco Smith, the Glasgow Warriors coach, and then Michael Checker, who we've said a few times before we start recording, would be just an interesting appointment. Any of those names scream to you, Grice, before, or do you just want to see how Sherratt does?
Yeah, I think it's a bit unfair at the moment to sort of speculate about all these other managers. I mean, he has signed a new deal with Cardiff, so he is committed to them beyond the end of this Six Nations tournament. So I do expect him to go back to club rugby after the end of this. But if he puts in a good enough performance, maybe he can be tempted by a full-time role. But of the other coaches that have been rumoured, I mean, Michael Checker's probably the obvious one to talk about. He's the biggest character out the lot, and like you said, it'd be an interesting one. I'm not really sure if his, should we say, personality necessarily coincides with ours, but maybe that's what we need, a little bit of a shake-up, a little bit of a change in aggression and directness, and just an overall overhaul of how we approach the game. It could be a good thing, but like I said before, there's a lot more that needs to change than just a coach. But if it can give us a bit of inspiration, I'm all for it.
Kevin, we've had multiple chats about Premier League managers being sacked way after than they should have been. Are you surprised that they've made the decision now, or are you in the camp that thinks he should have been sacked? Well, he should have left way before the tournament for someone else to really have an opportunity and get a full go at this Six Nations this year.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it on our preview pod, didn't we? I was very confused as to why he was still there in the first place.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just need a fresh start, and going back to Gatland, and it's nearly sad to see because he's the best coach in their history, and to see him go out like this mid-tournament after is it 14? Sorry, I don't want to give it is
losses, yeah.
14 consecutive losses and third in a row to Italy as well. And to see him go out at this low point, look, I don't know how many people will personally hold him accountable for a lot of the stuff that's going on, but for him, yeah, it's just I never really understood the move in the first place, and again, we briefly touched on the sort of, it's not really just performances on the pitch that have affected Welsh rugby. It's some fairly nasty stuff off the pitch as well. And I think they just need to clean out from top to bottom and start fresh. And unfortunately for Liam, I don't think it's gonna get better in the short term. And who knows? Maybe they'll survive before they bring relegation and promotion in the Six Nations and the second tier competition as well. But because they are, I believe, ranked below Georgia now in the in the world rankings.
I mean, should we get onto the discussion of promotion and relegation?
Yeah, well, look, I think that's where Wales are at the moment, unfortunately for them. And like I said, I think they just need clear it out from top to bottom, and just go from there, because you don't really have any other options at this point.
Yeah, and when you look at the result of the weekend, Grice, it's not a surprise at all. I know that you don't really probably want to talk about the result too much, but because you're the only one with me that watched the game, I have to come to you on this one. It wasn't great, was it? I mean, Italy didn't have to do much to cut through your defense. Like when you played against France in the first round, you could see that the defensive spirit was there. You could see organization, you could see the guys fighting for each other, but it was just so easy for Italy in that first 40 minutes, wasn't it?
It sounds really silly to say if you're just looking at the scoreline, but somehow a 43-0 loss to France felt better coming out of it than a 22-15 loss to Italy, purely because the players on the pitch looked like they wanted to be there. In the France game for the first 40 minutes anyway. I think that's the maximum we're going to get out a lot of these players, and they showed a bit more desire, a bit more grit, like you mentioned, especially in the defensive areas. And I thought, okay, if we can translate that into the Italy game, then maybe we've got a chance, you know what I mean? And it just wasn't there from the first minute. I mean, we were talking, weren't we, during the game, and I kept commenting on the constant gaps appearing, the lack of communication, which was so frustrating to see, because that's usually been our strong point, is our communication and our togetherness, especially in that defensive area, and it really just wasn't there. And attacking wise, I mean, it's even worse, devoid of ideas. I know we scored points, but they were only because Italy handed them us, really. I don't think we really did much in terms of creative ability ourselves, and for me that's maybe a bigger worry than the defense, because they have proved at some points they can perform. There is a spark there. Attacking wise, I have no idea where our points are going to come from anytime we step on the pitch, to be honest.
But Kevin, when you look at it from the other point of view, though, Italy aren't no slouch anymore. They aren't just there to take part in the Six Nations. They are there to compete with the bigger guys. I think when we did our preview podcast, we actually forgot to mention they almost beat France in France last year if it wasn't for that slip in the final minute of the game. And well, on Italy, this is just another good win for them in their progression, isn't it, in the Six Nations?
Oh, 100%. And even you look at the first game, of the tournament, they pushed Scotland quite close. You know, obviously they went down and brought them level, but they have been improving, and it was kind of like obviously for years it was like, right, Italy, wooden spoon, blah blah blah, and then they sort of had a bit of a resurgence, and then they sort of slipped back down, and it appears to be on the way up. And I think you just have to look at how the atmosphere inside the Stadio Olimpico as well. Like it's always a cracking ground to play football in, and since they moved to rugby there a good few years ago, it's been great. And they're able to hang around now, and previously that wasn't the case. And I was like we said, they've beaten Wales 3 times in a row now. They push Scotland. I mean, unfortunately for them, now their last 3 games are the toughest. But it is, like you mentioned, they do always play quite well in recent years against France. And obviously we'll get on to them. But yeah, look, I think.
And that game's in Italy as well, by the way.
That game is in Rome, exactly. So you never know. Look, I think they are obviously are progressing, and like Caputo is just like fantastic. Like he's so good. So
Allen as well at fullback. Kicking accuracy is unbelievable.
He was so good against us.
He's turned into Tomo Ramos. Like he doesn't seem like he's gonna miss. So look, I think that they obviously have Garbisi as well, and there's definitely stuff to get excited about. The next step, I think, obviously for them now is can you beat a Scotland? Can you beat an England? To sort of back that up, or even can you push France close again? Maybe even sneak a draw at home, and that is the next step. So they've France at home, they've Ireland at home, and then England at Twickenham. So look, I think I think there's lots to be positive about from an Italy perspective.